Hello, and welcome to Talkin Tabletop at Immortals. I'm Nate.
And I'm Lane.
And today we'll be discussing 40k kill team rules in depth.
Are you ready for deployment?
Let's do this. All right, so I think the first thing that we should probably talk about when it comes to any rule set in any game really is most people want to know, well, how do you win a game? 40k kill team is a small skirmish game set in the 40k universe. You are in control of a kill team, which is a hand-picked group of specialty operatives that will go to basically special forces that go to, they're not trying to win a war by tanks and guns and whatnot. These are your surgical strike teams that go in to do a specific task and then get out. In this game, to win, your operatives have to complete certain actions, and these actions include picking objectives, completing mission-specific requirements, and of course, killing the opposition.
Yeah, basically it breaks down to either kill things or stand somewhere.
Right. Or at other times, it's performing something, but like you said, it's basically standing somewhere and not dying at the same time. So the game itself is broken down into turns, what are called turning points, and each one has different phases to them. Most games will have 5 turning points, which means it's a 5-round game before the game is basically done. It normally is decided, in my opinion, it's normally decided by like the 3rd round, almost the 3rd turning point of the game. You got a pretty good grasp of, but the nice thing about this type of small skirmish game is something weird can happen at any time, and there are times where you'll be playing the game and you'll think, I'm definitely not going to win this. And then all of a sudden just you get a couple of lucky dice rolls, or you're able to get to a certain spot that somebody else isn't able to, or you're playing the objectives more than your opponent who's trying to play to kill you. And you pull out a victory by, even if it's heroic, you pull out a cool victory.
Oh yeah, I mean, any game that's based on dice rolls is going to have some swings, and sometimes they'll swing your way and sometimes they won't.
Yes. Oh yes. By far. Yes.
I think one of the interesting things about kill teams is that before you play the game, you essentially have a roster of up to 20 models. And then once you decide on the mission, you actually pull from that to build your kill teams. So you won't play with all 20 models at once, but depending on what the mission is, what the objectives are, what you're trying to accomplish that mission, depending on what your opponent is, you can actually pull from those to pull a certain.
And that's also something I really do like about the game is that yes, you have a wide range of abilities within these models, in these operatives. And I like that you don't have to, like, unlike a regular game of 40k is, I bring this army, you're bringing this army. I have no idea what you're bringing, you have no idea what I'm bringing. It's still the same with Kill Team. But I have a general idea of what you have on your list. And you have a general idea what I have on my list, because it's such a small scale game. But when you pick the mission, and you both agree to it, that's when it really, like the strategy part of the game even begins before you put a model on the table. You are being like, all right, if let's say this mission, I have to get a lot of movement. Well, I'm not going to be picking the ones that rely on you just standing there being stealthy or whatever. I need somebody with, like your Grots with grappling hooks or whatever, to just zoom around the board as quick as possible. The strategy part of it coming in even before you set up, I think is awesome.
Yeah, and if you're used to playing Warhammer 40k, you build your army based on a number of points, because every model is assigned a point value based on how effective it is in the game. So a small
subjectively,
little
yes.
goblin might be 5 points because he can't shoot very well and can't fight at all and doesn't have any armor, while a space marine might be 20 points because he's got a good gun and great armor and fights well. You don't have to worry about building an army around points with Kill Team. You just have a certain number of models you can take. For example, I'm looking at the Orc Commando Kill Team here, and how you build a list for a game is you have 1 Commando Nob. A Nob is an Orc leader,
right? And
then you have 9 more Orcs from that, and you get to choose from any different number of specialists, but you can't take more than 1 of each of those specialists. For example, there's an Orc Sniper, but you can't take 7 Orc Snipers. You can only take 1, and so it gives some variety to the game. Something will occur sometimes in Warhammer 40k is that someone will spam something. They'll find something that's really good and use a whole bunch of them. This kind of prevents that by kind of limiting the number of specialists you can.
And like getting back to that, like I like the point that you're like, all right, if you take this specialist, it's equipped with this. You know, there's a few specialists that you get to choose what they're equipped with, but most of them is they're equipped with this and they do this. And you don't have to be like, oh, okay, well, I really want to have this guy with a power sword or a power fist, but I don't have the points for it. You know, like in this one, they're just like, that doesn't matter. Like they can be equipped with this or this, and it's just a model. It's just that. And I like that a whole lot, especially, and I think what they do to even out like the more powerful units, like a game that we played, I had Chaos Space Marines and you had Orcs, and you had 10 Orcs on the table, and I had
5 or 6.
6 Space Marines was all I had on the table. So I mean, they even out what would be considered the points difference in model count, which I thought was really good, because in a small game like this where having position is key, not having as many bodies to do stuff, even if I can shoot better or what have you, is hugely disadvantaged. But I have more staying power on the table, obviously. So I like that they evened it out, not with just points, but like model count.
And the putting together your list for each game, it goes very quickly. Depending on the mission, you might choose different specialists. So I'm just looking at, again, the Orc kill team here for the Orc Commandos. And there are a lot of different, you have a Knob, which is a leader, and then I choose 9 other Orc operatives. And there's a basic Commando Orc boy, who just has a pistol and an axe. You've got a Grot, which is a little goblin Gretchen type of thing. You've got an Orc that's specialized in fighting and not shooting. So he's got a couple knives. You've got a guy with a breacher with a big battering ram. There's a sniper. There's somebody with a heavy machine gun. There's a communications expert. There's someone with a flamethrower. Someone that fires rocket launchers, and even a little bomb squig, little squiggly beast that runs around and explodes in your enemy's face. And because you have that option of choosing multiple, you can really kind of customize it per game. Some people would think of it as being complicated, but I just like that there's tactical depth to it. You have lots of choices and decisions you can make, which is something I love about the game.
I think you hit on it perfectly. The complexity is a good thing in a game. That gives you options and it gives you choices, and it makes the game more unique. But complication is terrible in a game because it just makes things frustrating. So they skirt that balance really, really well with Kill Team. I was surprised at how well they actually skirted it. And for people out there who are familiar with 40K, these operatives are not your typical orcs. These aren't guys hitting on 5s or better, just hitting on 5s or better or whatever. I mean, the orc sniper hits on 2s, right? You have orcs that can shoot effectively and well and are deadly. And I really like that they made a game where, like I said, was not just bolting rules onto 40K to make it work small scale. This is its own unique game. So I was very impressed. And the Imperial Guard that I played and the Chaos Space Marines that I played, they all have really, really, it's not just a typical Marine or it's not just your typical Guard. They have, depending on the operative, each operative will have a small, and it's not an overly complicated special rule too. It's something that does make sense, is very lore specific, and it's pretty cool.
And in the rule books, they have a card for each type of operative. So if if it's a sniper orc, then you've got the special rules right there in front of you. I have to dig through another chart somewhere in the book and something somewhere. It's all in one place, so it makes it a lot easier. Kind of look at the special rules for each.
Sat down to play a game, figured out the mission that we're going to play. Based on that mission, we pull our operatives from our command roster. Then we go into what's called the scouting phase. Scouting phase is interesting because it's unlike in previous editions where I pick a number, you pick a number, I get to do what this number does, you get to do what that number does. This has something a little different to it because depending on what number you pick, again, just like the last edition, you still get to do something, but depending on which number you pick also determines who will have initiative for the first round, which I thought was pretty cool because it's like a 1 will beat, or a 2 will beat a 1, a 3 will beat a 2, and a 1 beats a 3. Basically. So you have just 3 options to do, which isn't a whole lot, but it's done in secret, then you reveal at the same time, and you go from there. And I like that aspect a whole lot. I thought that was a great, unlike the scouting phase from the other one, which I still liked, because it was pretty cool, but there's definitely 2 of those scouting things that were always picked, and the other 5, or other 3 or 4 sometimes would just be completely abandoned. This one is just 3, and they're all equally good. And it's not just like, oh, I really want this to happen. Like, so I'm going to do this. It's like, what's my opponent going to have? Because I need first turn.
Yeah, it's a little mini game before the proper game. So once you've done the scouting phase, deployed all your models, you're ready to actually start playing a game.
Yes.
So for each turning point, there's an initiative phase where basically you roll off to see who's going to move their first model.
Except for the first turn. Yes.
Yeah. Now, when you put your models out, and I forget what the terminology is.
There's deployment.
Well, I mean, when it's...
in concealment or in engagement.
Yeah. So you can choose whether your model is hiding or whether he's ready to shoot. And what that does is mean a model is more likely to benefit from cover and hide if he's concealed, but then he can't shoot another model or can't charge into combat. And if a model is engaged, then they can shoot other models that are more likely shot at.
Yes, because they can be seen. We'll get into that in a minute, but line of sight in this game is very key when it comes to the shooting phase. But yes, like you said, when you deploy them all out, you have the either concealed or engaged. And that, again, is huge because there are times where you need this model to be in a certain place to perform a certain action, and you poking your head out to do things is going to be it's very deadly in this game. It's not like 40K where you just start moving stuff around. I mean, you really have to key in on where you're positioned, how you're positioned, where you are in relation to the enemies. So it's complex, but not really complicated. It's very second nature of who you're going to put engagement in and who you're concealment on.
Yeah, and I think with the alternating activation, in order for you to go out onto an objective or move your model to a location, remember, as soon as you want to move one model, your opponent's going to have the option to move, and they might decide to attack, fight in close combat, or shoot your model. You might suddenly lose whatever advantage you just gained. So you really have to go back and forth and think kind of what your opponent's going to do. Because as soon as you move one model, he gets to move one model, and we're going back and forth.
Right. And again, that's something I've always loved about Kill Team is the alternating activations. Not just you move your entire army, I sit there and roll dice in defense, then I move my entire army and do stuff, and you roll your defense stuff. You know, it just keeps the game really involved on both sides constantly.
So once we've determined initiative, the strategy phase, everyone gets a command point at the beginning of each turn. And a command point is used, it's a resource you use to essentially spend on little special actions you can do. We're not going to get into too much detail on that, but it's another way you can kind of, another layer of tactical depth where you might be able to make some of your models a little extra killy or a little extra fighty or a little extra, that'll have them able to run a little bit more or move a little bit more defensive. So if you need a little extra oomph at a certain point, you've got those command points that you can spend to do that.
And of course, the almighty command point reroll, where if you roll a die and you're like, oh, that's not the result I need, I'm going to try it again. You get a command point reroll. But as always, as soon as you spend a command point, it goes away.
Gone.
It is gone. And if you don't have enough command points to do a certain, because there are there are a lot of other actions that are multiple command points to use. You don't have the command points to do it, you just can't do it.
So once we've gotten our command points and played any stratagems we're going to play for that, we actually get into the meat and potatoes.
Yes, the
movement,
movement,
the shooting, and the fighting.
Yes. So movement is interesting. This is one aspect of the game I personally don't like.
I wouldn't call it interesting.
Yeah. Well, what's really nice about it is I don't know if this is focused on there, Mikey. All right. So you have these little widgets for movement, and each one has a geometrical shape. Again, I don't know why they chose the shapes they did. So you have a pentagon that's 6 inches. I don't know why they didn't go with a hexagon. That would make more sense to me, but anyway.
Or they could have just used 6 inches.
Right. I think that would have been better. You have
we've got a triangle that's 1 inch, a square that's 3 inches, and a circle that's 2 inches. So they provide these in the base game. You can also buy them separately, or you can just use figure out, or a measuring tape and figure. The nice thing is that in typical 40K, you've got different ranges for your guns. Other than pistols or maybe a short range weapon like a flamethrower in this game,
or a melta
most of the time, your guns essentially have the whole board. You don't have to worry too much about range unless it's specifically a close. But yeah, measuring any movement. So maybe you have an operative that moves 2 circles or
3
2
circles,
squares,
or yeah.
in which case you just use that edge to lay it down and move the model that far.
In straight lines, really, is how movement's supposed to be. So I get why they have the little widgets, but again, I'm more of a, and this is just personal preference. I like if it's a 6-inch movement or if it's whatever. I don't want 3 circles
Right.
as on the data slate of like, just you can move up to 6 inches, or any combination of inches to get to eventually 6.
Yeah.
So
I know some other skirmish games use different measuring sticks for short and long range, but for Star Wars Legion is one, for example. But typically, the Games Workshop games like Kill Team, they try to get more detailed and more granular with the rules. And so having all these 4 different measuring widgets with different shapes, it's a bit much. Really, in my brain, I just end up translating the shape into the number of inches in my head.
right, again,
I'm not thinking in circles and squares. I'm thinking 2 and 3 inches.
like I could understand a triangle being 3 inches, a circle being 1 inch, and
But that's not what it is.
and a straight line being 2 inches, and then a hexagon for 6. Like that would make sense to me because it's got the sides. But anyway, that's just a personal preference. And basically, though, you look at the character data sheets. If it's got 3 circles, okay, this model can move. This operative can move 6 inches. That's basically just this weapon has a 6-inch range. That's the gist of it.
And each, so when you're going to activate a model, so essentially after we've determined initiative at the beginning, so let's say I've got initiative. So I'm going to pick one of my models on the table, and I'm going to take it through its individual activation. And
I want to interrupt because not all models are just one model being activated. There are some models that have what's called a group activation where you can activate 2. But normally those are like I don't want to say the weaker models, but it's normally the base models. Like I have like just troopers. They don't have any special abilities. They don't have any special weapons. They're just, regular guardsmen troopers. Their activation is a 2. So when I activate 1, and then I immediately get to activate, and not necessarily one that's next to it or anything. I mean, it could be anywhere on the board. Another guardsman gets to go immediately after, which is actually a really good tactical advantage at some times.
Well, I think some of that depends on, more elite armies will only have 3 or 4 or 5 models in them. It doesn't make sense for the more elite to use up all their activations before the opponent has even been through half of theirs.
Right.
So I think that kind of balances out how the turns go back and forth. But once you decide to activate 1 or 2 or 3 of your models, depending on how many you can activate, you'll look at each of the little cards, the little data sheets for that model, and it has a number of action points, so you can do multiple actions. For most models, it's 2, but some of the more elite ones might be 3 or even more than that. And so you can move, shoot, fight, or you can perform some other actions. Some of them are specific to the mission. So you might have an action you need to do in order to score points in the game. But yeah, so if you have 2 action points, you might decide to move and then have that shoot. So moving, as we just talked about, was involving using the measuring sticks. So we're going to measure out their movement and hopefully get them into cover so that they're protected from being shot at. So I guess next we can talk about shooting.
Yeah, I think, and we'll go right into shooting because that's normally what 40K, it's futuristic, so you have a lot of guns. In the shooting phase, a lot of it depends on what's called line of sight, and determining line of sight is it's the most crunchy part of the game. I can't get into too much of it, but basically, unlike in previous games where it's just like, all right, you're going to shoot at somebody, measure out the distance. If they're behind something, you're going to get these negatives to your roll to do it. That's no longer there. Now it's either you see that model or you do not. And to determine if you see that model or if you do not see that model depends a lot on if it's concealed, if it has a concealment order, if it has an engagement order, if it's behind something, if it's behind a certain type of terrain. It's the most, like I said, crunchiest part of the rule set. However, it makes the game, in my opinion, a lot better.
Well, it really takes advantage of terrain. One thing with Warhammer is there's often the terrain plays a big part of it, and you often say that the terrain's like the third player. So depending on the terrain, you might be able to move your model into cover so it can benefit from being covered, maybe not being seen, maybe getting a bonus to its defensive rolls if it's being shot at or attacked. So using that cover to your advantage, using that terrain to your advantage is a big part of the game.
Especially having what's called vantage points where you can actually, and there's also operatives that can have actions that allow other things that are on vantage points to see even concealed models. So I mean, it's very crunchy, and like I said, we can't get into it all here, but I really like that it's not just a negative. It's, I can see this or I can't, and if I can see it, it's getting shot at. That's about all the time we have right now. I'd just like to remind anybody who's watching that all of the stuff that we are talking about, this game in general, is available here at Immortals Inc. down in Rocky River. Please come on down at any time and talk to the great staff or any of the friendly local gamers here that would love to nerd out with you and talk about their favorite games.
And speaking of terrain, Immortals has got a lot of tables set up here that you can play games on, and they have a huge collection of terrain that you can use to set up games and play on. You will not want for terrain. It won't just be like a box here or a stack of books with something on top of it, which all of us did in our youth. This is good terrain that is readily available for anybody to just grab off the shelf and put on the table and play. Until next time, when we will get more into the other phases of the rules for 40K, I'm Nate. I'm Lane.
And thanks for watching.